Hello, I thought I'd have a look at some of the comments, and one that really sticks out is Stephen Howard 3358, who says, "The ever-changing Iron Lady who declared the ladies not for turning." Well, she declared that because she'd turned so often, and it's a flourish of a bit of rhetoric. One of the two areas of note that one should look at when one's looking at Thatcherism and the effects of Thatcherism are the complete transformation of the educational policies and the way education is managed in Britain today, or mismanaged, depends on your point of view. And secondly, the development of a punitive approach to criminal law. Rather than seeing prisons as a form of rehabilitation, it's very much about being strong and about being clear on law and order. And it's something that has been embraced, or that was embraced, by the Tony Blair Labour Party, as well as by John Major and by subsequent Conservative prime ministers and administrations. And it's a very clear movement. Beyond that, the actual the actual gap between what was in the manifesto and what was in the and what became law is quite extreme during the Thatcher years, and I urge you to have a look at it. Stephen Howe goes on, "I guess if you live in a community where coal mining was a thing, you might have a differing opinion to the Prof on Mrs. T." Well, I was at school in an area where coal mining was a thing, and I remember regularly when I was first there, the coal scuttles going across the road, and then they weren't. And I have a lot of sympathy for people in coal mining areas, and I also think that the aggressive approach to destroying the union power in coal mining was a great mistake, and also the severing of the North from the South was a great mistake, and the levelling up program might have helped if it had been in the hands of somebody who was competent as opposed to a twit like Michael Gove. So the fact that I'm appealing for you to look at Mrs. Thatcher's practice rather than the polemic which is put out by the BBC, it's not an invitation for you to turn around and say, "Oh, I'm praising Mrs. Thatcher's work on coal mining," or "I'm praising Mrs. Thatcher's work on the LGBTQ plus community." Clause 28 was another aspect of Thatcherism that I would wholly condemn, and more than that, it was repudiated in later parliaments. But for a long period it went on, particularly after Thatcher was removed. I think had she remained in place, Clause 28 would have been muted or modified or even repealed by her. I think she was capable of seeing when something was wrong. That was wrong. But more than that, it provided a blueprint for the pernicious law of President Putin, which has stamped its mark, along with the foreign influence law, from the Duma onto modern Russian society. It's been a way of pressuring his own society and people in Russia to conform. It's an act of aggression and an act of control. And in that, he was inspired by Thatcher. And I think you misunderstand my interest and admiration for Thatcher. I admire her enormously as a politician and as a charismatic and individual world leader. We don't have very many in this country, but she was. It doesn't mean I endorse all the things she does, or she did. I think I should probably use that in the present tense, because her effect, her image continues today to have both a negative and a positive effect, as it did at the time when she was Prime Minister. Steve Howard continues, she certainly didn't waver on her quest to crush the mining industry and the union employing the police to do her dirty work. I think if you look at her diaries and if you look at her memoir, I think she spends a lot of time pointing out how painful it was. I think she was somebody who was who was quite capable of pursuing a policy which caused pain, and of understanding the emotional hurt that created and the pain that created, but nevertheless believing that she was right. I happen to think in both Clause 28 and in her pursuit of the miners, she was wholly wrong. DDDDBBB says, I'm in this constituency, that's the constituency of Jeremy Hunt. I will be tactically voting Lib Dem. Stuart Ivans says, trust that Rishi has no Mac, has a plan for the future. You're right. Build back wetter slogan. Absolutely. The fact that somebody is engaging with the microphone, engaging with the public by saying, I have a plan, plan, does not mean that he has one. We've yet to hear his plan. And one of the things which I find so strange is we know nobody can remember the 5 points in the Rishi plan, or at least it's a struggle to do so. Laura Quensberg demonstrated this last Sunday. And why would a plonker then decide that if you can't remember five pledges, why would you remember 6? A clever and an insightful Labour manifesto would have 3 pledges, or even one. If I were the leader of the Labour Party or the leader of any party, I would have 1 pledge. I don't know what it would be, but I would get it down to 1. People can remember 1 thing. They can barely remember 3. They cannot remember 5. And 6, you give up. I don't understand. Is he trying to outdo the Conservatives? What is the point? If he wants to outdo the Conservatives, just do a bit more sleaze. Simon Evans says, delusional. Rishi is. Rather like the little green fellow in Star Wars, speaking grammatically out of order. Delusional. Rishi is. Good place to ask about the failure of shipping. The Titanic was built in Belfast. Sunak will know all about that. Absolutely. The 2 things is not only shipping, but also the fishing industry, the farming industry, these 2 things on which a lot of the Brexit propaganda was promoted. And yet fishing is dying. Farming is struggling because of Brexit, not despite Brexit. They're struggling because of Brexit. And the shipbuilding industry is on its knees. Great Burke says, he's extremely rich and doesn't care. Shame we won't get a refund. A Rishi refund. Yeah. And Eliakim Joseph Sophia says, there is Liberal Democrat politicians in local government that are corrupt. There are people of all political colours in local government that are corrupt, not only in Britain, but across the world. Local government, unfortunately, breeds corruption because it gives power to silly individuals who then think that they are important. Importance breeds sleaze, and it goes with the territory. I think if anybody is surprised by corruption in Britain, they need to go to countries where corruption is done much better. And I've travelled a lot in countries in the southern Mediterranean and beyond to Russia, of course, and I have seen corruption at close hand. I can remember very much being given instructions about how to get medical care in Greece and how important it was to have the right denomination and the right amount of money in the white envelope called a fakilaki. Get the bribe wrong, and you could well find yourself coming out of hospital with an amputated foot. And get the bribe right, and you're fine. But that is corruption, isn't it? And I'm rather pleased to be able to say a lot of that has gone from Greece, from Turkey. Turkey has had an amazing transformation. Albania is well on the way to sorting out, it's at least identified its corruption. And Russia, well, it's got an entirely new lease of life for corruption, which I had not anticipated in 2014, 2016, 2019, and so on. And I'm very pleased to be out of it because I could not manage that. And I don't think I would have survived at all in Russia if I hadn't spent 10 years or so living in Greece and trying to work within the Greek economy as a non-Greek. It was very, very tough. And as somebody who believed that what was written on the paper, what I was directed to do, was what I should do. And I found that a very positive and interesting education, and I'm deeply and endlessly grateful to my Greek friends for opening my eyes to the reality of human beings. And now I'm afraid, I'm afraid I have antenna for corruption in the same way as having been on the television program The Circle. I have a sort of third sense about catfishing and and about lies in the ether of the internet. And so I know there's quite a number of catfish, by the way, who are leaving comments. There are some very entertainingly who leave comments and then comment on their own comments under different names, which I find quite fascinating. What you have to remember when you're trying to catfish is to try and get a different quality of language to the different characters that you try to inhabit. So if you have two characters speaking the same language, or indeed occasionally using exactly the same words, I think it becomes rather obvious, and it's very difficult to keep all these balls in the air at any one time. And then I find it also fascinating when Russians catfish on here or troll on here and forget their definite articles or get the tenses wrong. And again, it seems very obvious to me. I don't call a lot of people out because what's the point? I would much rather hear what people have got to say than silence them. So please keep it coming. I'm always entertained.